Hello, and welcome to this presentation on construction safety and emergency planning, presented by Tech Training LLC. In this presentation, we're going to cover the following areas: history of OSHA, OSHA's most cited violations, serious and willful violations, creating a construction safety program, and emergency management. So, let's begin with an introduction to OSHA and OSHA's history. Though OSHA is responsible for many industries, OSHA's connection with the construction industry is historic and close. But let's start with discussing the creation of OSHA and its purpose. In response to dangerous working conditions across the nation, and as a culmination of decades of reform, the bipartisan Williams-Steiger Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 was signed into law by then-President Richard M. Nixon. This law led to the establishment of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, and the Independent Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission. OSHA was passed to prevent workers from being killed or seriously harmed at work. The law requires employers to provide their employees with working conditions that are free of known dangers. OSHA sets and enforces protective workplace safety and health standards. It was officially established on April 28, 1971. OSHA also provides information, training, and assistance to workers and employers. Workers may file a complaint to have OSHA inspect their workplace if they believe their employer is not following OSHA standards or there are serious hazards. OSHA is part of the United States Department of Labor. The administrator for OSHA is the Assistant Secretary of Labor for Occupational Safety and Health. OSHA's administrator answers to the Secretary of Labor, who is a member of the Cabinet to the President of the United States. OSHA, with state partners, have approximately 2,500 inspectors responsible for the health and safety of over 150 million workers employed at approximately 10 million work sites around the country. This means there is approximately one compliance officer for every 60,000 workers in the United States. OSHA has 10 regional offices and 85 local area offices. OSHA's budget is small by comparison to other regulatory agencies. In fact, OSHA's 2019 budget was $557,787,000. This was an increase of $5 million over the 2017 and 2018 budgets, both of which were $552,787,000. In 2019, OSHA performed over 32,000 federal inspections and over 40,000 state planned inspections. In 1913, 23,000 industrial deaths had been reported. This was among 38 million U.S. workers. And this was 1913, so many accidents and fatalities were not reported. The situation only grew worse. From 1935 to 1960, more than 400,000 workers were killed on the job. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 5,250 workers were killed on the job in the year 2018. This is an average of 100 people per week, or more than 14 deaths every day. 1,008 of those deaths were in the construction industry. Since 1971, workplace fatalities have been reduced by more than 60%, and occupational injury and illness rates have declined by 71%. At the same time, U.S. employment has almost doubled. worker deaths in America are down on average from about 38 worker deaths a day in 1971 to 14 a day in 2018. Worker injuries and illnesses are down from 10.9 incidents per 100 workers in 1972 to 3.0 per 100 workers in 2018. Out of 4,779 worker fatalities in private industry in the calendar year 2018, 1,008, or 21.1%, were in construction. The leading causes of worker deaths on construction sites was falls, followed by struck by an object, electrocution, and caught in between. These fatal four were responsible for more than half, 58.6%, of construction worker deaths in 2018, as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Eliminating the fatal four would have saved 591 workers in America. The statistics of the fatal four are as follows: falls, 338 people; struck by an object, 112 people; electrocution, 86 people; and caught in between, 55 people. The following were the top 10 most frequently cited standards by federal OSHA in fiscal year 2019, October 1, 2018 through September 30, 2019. Number 1, fall protection, a construction standard. Number 2, hazard communication. This is a standard in general industry. Number 3, scaffolding. This is for general requirements and is exclusive for construction. Next, control of hazardous energy, more commonly referred to as lockout tagout. This too applies to general industry. Number 5, respiratory protection, general industry. Number 6, ladders, exclusive to the construction industry. Number 7, powered industrial trucks, general industry. Next is fall protection for training requirements. This is specific to the training procedures implemented regarding fall protection. Number 9, machinery and machine guarding. And finally, number 10, eye and face protection. In the next slides, we will give a breakdown of these frequently cited OSHA violations, including the specific violation under which the regulation was cited. We will also show you some comparisons to previous years. So, let's start with number 1, fall protection, 1926.501. This standard outlines when fall protection is required, which systems are appropriate for given situations, the proper construction and installation of safety systems, and the proper supervision of employees to prevent falls. It is designed to protect employees on walking or working surfaces, horizontal or vertical, with an unprotected side or edge higher than 6 feet. According to OSHA, fall protection with 7,014 reported violations was the most cited standard. The top 5 citations in this standard were as follows: guardrail systems or alternative fall protection measures, unprotected sides and edges, roofing work on low-slope roofs, steep roofs, and holes. This is openings in platforms and other worker support systems with large openings. This same standard was number 1 in 2018 with 7,216 citations. Though there was a decrease from 2018 to 2019, the decrease was small, and fall protection has been the number 1 cited issue in construction for a number of years. Number 2 was hazard communication. 1910.1200. This standard addresses chemical hazards produced in the workplace and imported into the workplace. It also governs the communication of those hazards to workers. OSHA has cited the standard 4,170 times. The top 5 sections of the standard cited were as follows: maintaining a written hazard communication program, providing employees with information and training, maintaining safety data sheets, workplace labeling, and developing and maintaining safety data sheets. Hazard communication was ranked number 2 in 2018 with 4,537 citations. So, though the standard held its number 2 position, there was a significant improvement in the citations issued. Number 3 was scaffolding, 1926.451. This standard covers general safety requirements for scaffolding, which should be designed by a qualified person and constructed and loaded in accordance with the design. Employers are required to protect construction workers from falls and falling objects while working on or near scaffolding at heights of 10 feet or higher. OSHA issued 3,228 violations for the standard in 2019, a slight decrease from 2018. The top 5 in the standard were as follows: employee fall protection, point of access for scaffold platforms, planking or decking requirements, foundation requirements, and guardrail requirements. Next up, lockout tagout, 1910.147. This standard saw an increase in violations from 2018 to 2019 of 2,923 up to 2,975. This also moved the standard from the number 5 most cited violation in 2018 to the number 4 most cited in 2019. This standard outlines minimum performance requirements for the control of hazardous energy during servicing and maintenance of machines and equipment. The most cited violations in this category were energy control procedure, training and communication, annual periodic inspection, energy control program, and lockout or tagout device procedures. Number 5 is respiratory protection, 1910.134. This standard directs employers on how to establish or maintain a respiratory protection program. It lists requirements for program administration, worksite-specific procedures, respirator selection, employee training, fit testing, medical evaluation, respirator use, and respirator cleaning, maintenance, and repair. This standard was number 4 in 2018 with 3,112 violations. It improved to number 5 in 2019 with a significant decrease in violations, down to 2,826. The top 5 violations in this category were medical evaluation, establishing and implementing written respiratory protection programs, permitting employees to voluntarily not use respirators when required, fit testing prior to first use, and ensuring face-piece respirators are fit tested. Ladders, 1926.1053, was number 6. This standard covers general requirements for all ladders. Ladders was also number 6 in 2018 with 2,780 violations. There was hardly any change in 2019 with 2,766 violations. The top 5 violations were requirements for portable ladders used for accessing upper landing surfaces, ladders used only for its designed purpose, using the top or top step of the stepladder as a step, not marking portable ladders with structural defects with tags noting them as defective, and lastly, not using the ladders on a stable, level surface. Powered industrial trucks 1910.178 were number 7 in 2019 with 2,347 violations. This standard covers the design, maintenance, and operation of powered industrial trucks, including forklifts and motorized hand trucks. It also covers operator training requirements. This standard was also number 7 in 2018 with 2,281 violations. The top 5 in this category were safe operations, refresher training and evaluation, operator training and certification, removing unsafe powered industrial trucks from service, and examination of industrial trucks. Number 8 was fall protection for training requirements, 1926.503. This standard is specific to fall protection training. In 2019, this standard had 2,059 violations, and in 2018, it had 1,978 violations. Furthermore, this standard was also number 8 in 2018. The top 5 violations for this category were training program for each employee, certification of employee training, employee being trained by qualified personnel, inadequacies in an affected employee's knowledge or use of fall protection systems, and retraining of the employees. Number 9 was machine guarding, 1910.212. This standard covers guarding of machinery to protect operators and other employees from hazards, including those created by point of operation, nip points, rotating parts, flying chips and sparks, etc. This standard had 1,987 violations. It was also number 9 in 2018 with 1,969 violations. The top 5 violations were type of guarding, point of operation guarding, anchoring fixed machinery, general requirements, and exposure of blades. Finally, number 10 was eye and face protection, 1926.102, had 1,630 violations in 2019. This was also number 10 in 2018 with 1,528 violations. The top 5 in this category were use of appropriate eye and face protection, side protection, wearing eye protection that incorporates corrective lenses, and protective eye and face protection devices must comply with consensus standards. Now, with this information in mind, let's take a look at serious violations within these categories. OSHA defines a serious violation as one in which there is substantial probability that death or serious physical harm could result, and the employer knew or should have known of the hazard. As you can see on the right, of the 7,014 fall protection violations, OSHA felt that 5,677 of them were serious. Here, scaffolding is number 2 with 2,939 serious violations, while hazard communication had 2,754. Also note, for eye and face protection, there are 1,449 serious violations. there were only 1,630 total violations for eye and face protection. This means when cited for eye and face protection, there is an 89% chance it will be considered a serious violation. Here we see the list of willful violations. A willful violation is defined as committed with an intentional disregard of or plain indifference to the requirements of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. As you can see, these violations are not issued lightly. Of the 7,014 fall protection violations, only 164 were considered willful. However, when issued these violations, they carry a heavy penalty. And now, after this introduction to OSHA, let's take a look at establishing a safety plan. In this segment, we are going to discuss establishing a safety program focused on preventing injuries on the job site. The interaction between workers, equipment, management, and machines are complex enough, but even more complexity is generated when all these people and machines are brought together to form the job site. Now we're in construction, so we're used to it. But let's assume something has been added to this environment. As an example, perhaps a family member is sick or an old friend is ill. Maybe the home office called and asked for the schedule to be accelerated. Or maybe you received some unexpected bills and suddenly you have financial pressure. And when they all come together, we have an accident. So, what can be done? To answer these questions, we're going to move on to creating, improving, and maintaining a job site safety program. All too often, safety programs can become so complex, management and workers disregard them. So here, we're going to focus on just 4 key areas: leadership, job site safety analysis, hazard prevention, and training. Without question, leadership is the most important quality of job site safety. But what is safety leadership? Safety leadership is defined as the process of defining the desired state, setting up the team to succeed, and engaging in the discretionary efforts that drive the safety value, which broadly boils down to engaging in and maintaining behaviors that help others achieve our safety goals. So, what does this mean, and why is it important? A leader is the head of a group of people who possesses the skills to lead, inspire, and influence the others to pursue their personal growth and the team's goals. This may sound corny, but it's true. If a leader makes small gestures to let the team know they really care, it makes a huge difference. Telling someone to put on their hard hat because you don't want to see them injured goes a lot further with the team than telling them to put on their hard hat because you don't want to be fined by OSHA. Just think of the difference. Safety performance is driven by the leadership on the job site. Leaders establish the procedures, enforce the accountability, and establish the values of the safety program. Put simply, safety leaders set the standards of safe behavior on the job site. Leaders manage their own safety behaviors, but also provide the motivation for his or her subordinates, co-workers, and the management of the company. Leadership is not management. Leadership is a voluntary activity that an individual exerts through example over co-workers, through appropriate behavior that produces an environment of shared goals and effective positive change on the job site. Management is part of the organizational structure, but exert formal influence over subordinates. there is clearly a distinct difference. So hopefully, it should be obvious that any individual on the job site can be a safety leader if they so choose. This is a critical point because it is crucial to have safety leaders at every job site. This creates a strong safety culture that leads to overall improved safety performance. It should also emphasize that senior management may not be the most knowledgeable about present dangers of a particular job site. This is not to say that senior management does not play a key role in safety. In fact, it should be management's role to impress upon the workforce that anyone can be a safety leader as long as they are willing to take the necessary actions to keep themselves and their coworkers free of dangers and injuries. This leadership is done through guidance, persuasion, direction, and setting the example. Safety leaders do not influence others through power, status, or authority. They demonstrate high safety standards and inspire coworkers to do the same. And this leads us to job site analysis. Much the same way the roles of leaders and managers differ, so does job site analysis and hazard identification. Job site analysis is reviewing the job site and specific tasks to identify potential hazards, even if they do not exist at that time. This is a scientific approach to reducing potential accidents. Hazard identification is, for lack of a better word, artistic. It is the ability to see something everyone else sees, but be able to identify that as a potential serious accident. But first, let's review the basic steps to conducting a job site safety analysis. Job site safety analysis can be applied to the entire site or to specific tasks. Either way, this is a 4-step process. Step number 1 is to select the jobs and/or site to be analyzed. However, if this is a first job site analysis, both routine and non-routine tasks should be analyzed. Furthermore, whenever a new task is going to be performed, the job site analysis should be completed before that task commences. Step number 2 is to break the task down into a defined sequence. This is a critical step. Many times, when performing a job site analysis on a routine task, we tend to skip over or outright forget certain steps in the process. It is important to note, at this point in the analysis, do not try to identify the hazards. Simply make sure that you have all of the steps of the task identified. Our next step will be to identify the hazards. As promised, step 3, identify the potential hazards of each task. After completing step 2, go back through the sequence in an attempt to identify anything that could possibly go wrong in the process. For this reason, it is helpful to have someone on the job site analysis team of a specific task who does not ordinarily, or never will, perform the task, as these individuals tend to ask many thought-provoking questions. And finally, step 4, develop preventative measures to reduce or eliminate the hazards identified. This will typically involve one of the following: additional or improved personal protective equipment, engineering controls, or alternative methods to completing the task. Regardless, the job site analysis should be complete and the results should be followed. So now, let's move on to the artistic side of job site safety: hazard identification. Step 1 is to identify anything that may cause harm. This can be difficult. Little things can cause significant harm. For this reason, it pays to have an imagination when identifying hazards. If you've ever taken one of our safety courses, then you've seen our pyramid of hazard identification. Here we take a small item, such as a little soap on the floor, and try to escalate it to the worst possible thing that could happen. So, a person could slip on the soap. They could fall and hurt their back. They may fall and break an arm, or even worse, they could hit their head, get a serious fracture of the skull, and die. Not only is it possible, but it has happened. Consider the many people that you may have heard of slipping on ice, suffering a skull fracture, and dying from the injuries. One of the more famous incidents was Dr. Atkins, creator of the famous Atkins diet. Dr. Atkins slipped on some ice outside of a hotel. His head struck the pavement, and he later died from his injuries. Just imagine if someone had taken the time to shovel away the ice, or in our scenario, wipe up the soap. We hope you can see this takes imagination, but it is worth it. Step 2 is to identify anyone who may be hurt by the potential hazards and how they're going to be injured. In our soap on the floor example, the answer is anyone could get injured. And obviously, there are a multitude of ways for them to get injured. However, for hazard identification on the construction job site, the individuals who could get injured and how they will be injured may have a narrower or wider scope of possibilities depending upon the task. Step 3 is to take action. By far the most important step. Once again, imagine if someone had shoveled the ice or wiped up the soap. This prevents minor and serious injury. If the hazard involves something you cannot correct, you can still take action. Report the hazard, block off the hazard to prevent others from entering the area, and talk to the individual in charge of that area. The most important thing is to do something. Step 4. Make a record of the incident. When there is a written record of an incident, it becomes a trigger for future job site analyses. Your record will improve the job site you are on, as well as future job sites for your coworkers. Written documentation is critical to the overall safety and improvement of the job site and the job site safety program. Finally, step 5 is to review the risk assessment. Again, this should be in your written record of step 4. Is this the only place this particular incident could occur? Could this incident have been worse? What other potential hazards does this incident possess? Each of these questions should be asked and answered in your review. The fourth and final leg of any successful safety program is training. One of the first steps to demonstrating your commitment to safety is to incorporate a clause regarding safety into your company's mission statement or core values. This allows everyone to understand that one of the guiding principles of your business is their safety. This message will be received by your employees, subcontractors, and your clients. Next, emphasize and demonstrate employee education. After you've created your job site safety program, it's time to get employees on board. Employee training is always done when the employee is first hired, but you should also train employees on any new changes in procedure if an employee has moved to a new job site, if new equipment has been received, or upon noticing or being informed of any new hazards. A regular refresher also never hurts. Lastly, get your team on board through continuous improvement. Constantly evaluate the program. Remember, it's not personal, it's improvement. This was touched on briefly earlier, but it's critical to make sure to investigate all workplace accidents, no matter how minor they may be. More often than not, these incidents are entirely preventable, and it's important to determine the cause in order to come to a safer solution in the future. As unfortunate as these accidents are, they provide a chance to make working conditions safer for employees in the future. You should also continue to make employee feedback a priority, even if it is anonymous. Workplace duties are always evolving, and new safety risks can present themselves faster than most employers realize. And one final comment on training. It never hurts for you to get away for a seminar on safety. One day, half a day, a week, you will always pick up something new that you can bring back to the job site. This also demonstrates to your coworkers and clients that safety is the continuous value of your business and personal culture. Keep the overall goal simple. No one ever gets hurt. But unfortunately, sometimes people do get hurt. So now let's move on to emergency response and planning. Emergency preparedness minimizes human suffering and economic losses that can result from construction emergencies. The size, complexity, and configuration of projects, and probably more importantly, their access and location, have a bearing on the degree of planning necessary for emergencies. Therefore, it is critical that a member of the on-site team assists in the development and execution of the emergency response plan. Planning should begin before any work commences. There is typically little time between the award of the contract and the start of the project. Therefore, a good emergency response plan should be generic in nature and, with some minor changes, be easily adapted to specific sites and readily implemented. This is especially the case where contractors specialize in similar types of projects. Every plan should include, but is not limited to, hazard identification and assessment, emergency resources, communication systems, administration of the plan, emergency response procedures, communication of the procedures, and debriefing and post-traumatic stress procedures. The process of hazard identification and assessment involves a thorough review of all procedures that will take place on the project. This review should include the following: transportation, material handling, hoisting, equipment installation, temporary structures, and material storage. This is a long list, but it is an opportunity for the contractor to determine what is relevant to the project and what is not. It is also up to the contractor to add any additional items that may not be included in this list. As you can see, this differs from the job site analysis, where we would be focusing on a specific task. Some other items that should be included in the initial safety review include startup and commissioning activities, environmental concerns, client consultation, safety resources, MSDS, first aid kits, etc., and proximity to traffic, public ways, and neighbors. Because construction sites are frequently changing in nature and setup, the process of hazard assessment must be ongoing to accommodate the dynamic environment. Once hazards are identified, the next task is to assess the potential or risks involved in each hazard. To do this, ask 2 simple questions for each hazard. What can go wrong, and what are the consequences? Don't forget our pyramid of hazard identification. Little things can cause serious injury. For each potential hazard, it is important to identify the resources necessary for an appropriate emergency response. For most events in construction, a simple analysis based upon the experience of the people involved in the project is likely to be sufficient. It is important to identify which resources are available at your site and to have contingency plans in place to make up for any deficiencies. The most important resource on most projects will be the 911 system. As an example, if the work is at elevated heights, is a high-reach rescue team available in the project location? If the potential exists for toxic hazards, is a hazmat team available? What is the expected response time to the project location? What can be done while waiting for first responders? These questions should be asked and answered as part of the emergency response plan. When 911 receives a cell phone call, they cannot accurately determine the location. They will call the wireless carrier who gets the location from a cell tower via a ping. This ping may be accurate or off by hundreds of yards. All wireless phones, even those that are not subscribed to or supported by a specific carrier, can call 911. However, calls to 911 on cell phones without active service do not deliver the caller's location to the dispatcher, and the call center cannot call these phones back to find out the caller's location. Therefore, the person calling must be capable of delivering this information. These no-service phones are often used to place fake calls to 911. As part of your plan, consider the project location. There may be a small construction site inside of a large building. Be prepared to get the specific address and apartment number of the emergency. Large sites may have multiple addresses. Be sure to identify all addresses on the site and where you will send the emergency response personnel. The 911 dispatcher will also ask for the phone number from where you're calling and the nature of the emergency. Some locations are equipped for texting emergency calls and others are not. If you think this is a potential possibility from your hazard evaluation, check with the local authorities to find out their capabilities. But even if texting is available, the call is always preferred. Other on-site resources, such as fire extinguishers, spill containment equipment, and first aid kits, must be maintained and clearly identified. Construction equipment may be included among potential emergency resources. Personnel, especially on-site medical staff and all workers trained in first aid, should be included in the preparation of the plan. There may be situations where outside resources are so far away that an adequate response is not possible. In these situations, resources may have to be obtained and kept on site. Examples would include fire protection or ambulance medical resources. Whatever the situation may be, people, equipment, facilities, and materials are needed for emergency response. Where they will come from must be determined in advance. Moreover, the people supplying these resources must be made aware of their role in the plan. While we're on the subject of cell phones, let's discuss the overall communication system for the project. An important key to effective emergency response is a communication system that can relay accurate information quickly. To do this, reliable communication equipment must be used, procedures developed, and personnel trained. It is a good idea to have a backup system in place in case the system is rendered useless by the emergency. An example would be phone service getting knocked out. The type and location of emergency communications systems should be posted on the project. This will include location of landline phones, personnel with cell phones, personnel with two-way radios, and any other communication equipment available on the site. Emergency phone numbers and the site address location should be posted beside all site phones. On large sites, the location of emergency phones should be clearly marked and posted. A communications system should be made up of strategically located equipment and properly defined responsibilities. The emergency response plan posted in a conspicuous place on the project should identify designated equipment, its location, and if necessary, those individuals trained to use it. The administration of the plan is also very important. The task of administering and organizing the plan is vital to its effectiveness. The person or persons who have this responsibility will normally be the person in charge of the emergency response operations. It is their task to ensure everyone clearly understands their roles and responsibilities within the response plan. Emergency resources, whether people or equipment, are kept at adequate levels and are in step with the progress of the project. It is very important to review the emergency plan on a regular basis, and especially after an emergency has occurred. Changes may be necessary where deficiencies became apparent as the plan went into operation. An emergency can be reported from any source: a worker, on-site visitor, outside agency, or the public. Remember, circumstances may change during the course of an emergency. Any procedures developed must be able to respond to a fluid situation. Here, fluid is being used figuratively and possibly literally. The list you see here covers basic actions to take in an emergency. The steps can apply to almost any emergency situation and should be followed in sequence. First and foremost, stay calm, assess the situation, take command, provide protection, aid and manage, maintain contact, and guide emergency services. Let's take a look at each of these steps. Stay calm. People follow leadership. Your example can influence others and thereby assist or hinder the emergency response. Assess the situation. Determine what happened. Determine the emergency. Look at the big picture. What has happened to whom? And, just as important, what may continue to happen. Also, as part of the assessment, identify and control the cause if possible. Then, again if possible, eliminate any immediate, ongoing, or further danger. The most senior person on the scene should take charge or delegate someone to call emergency services. Again, the call will generally go to 911, so the situation should be explained clearly. Now, assign tasks for controlling the emergency. This action also helps to maintain order and prevent panic. Next, we need to provide protection. This means eliminating any further losses and safeguarding the area. If there is an energy source which needs to be controlled, control it. Protect victims, equipment, materials, and the environment. Protect the accident scene from any continued damage or other hazards. If necessary, divert traffic, suppress fire, prevent objects from falling, shut down equipment and utilities, and take any other necessary measures. Preserve the accident scene. only disturb what is essential to maintain life or relieve human suffering and prevent immediate further losses. This will be critical for the investigation which follows. Now, provide first aid or help those already doing so. Manage personnel at the scene. Organize the workforce for both a head count and emergency assignments. Direct all workers to a safe location or command post. This makes it easier to identify the missing, control panic, and administer emergency duties. At this point, dispatch personnel to guide emergency services on arrival. Keep emergency services informed of the situation. Contact utilities, such as gas and hydro, where required. Alert management and keep them informed. Increase control over the emergency until immediate hazards are controlled or eliminated and causes can be identified. Meet emergency services and lead them to the scene of the emergency. Explain ongoing and potential hazards as well as known hazards. To be effective, emergency response procedures must be clearly communicated to all site personnel. The following activities should be considered. Review the procedure with new site subcontractors and new workers to ensure the plan covers their activities adequately. Review the procedure with suppliers to ensure that it covers any hazards the storage or delivery of their materials might create. Review new work areas or operating plants with owner and clients to ensure that new hazards are identified and covered in the procedures. Review the procedures with the safety team on a regular basis to address new hazards or significant changes in site operations and conditions. Post the procedures in readily available areas where they can be seen or accessed by all personnel. The emergency response procedure for a construction site must continually undergo review and revision to meet changing conditions. The recovery process, or what happens after the emergency response has been completed, is a critical step in the plan. Many emergency tasks may be handled by people who are not accustomed to dealing with emergencies. People may have seen their co-workers, friends, and partners badly injured, suffering great pain, or even killed. Once the emergency is over, the attitude should not be, "Let's get back to work." Some people involved in the incident may need assistance in order to recover. In some cases, professional counseling may be needed. Debriefing is necessary to review how well the plan worked in the emergency and to correct any deficiencies that were identified. Debriefing is critical to the success of future emergency response planning. A slow response, a lack of resources, the absence of a plan, and the absence of trained personnel will most assuredly lead to chaos in an emergency. To minimize human suffering and financial losses, all personnel must know their responsibilities under the emergency response plan. Once again, every emergency plan should include the following points: hazard identification and assessment, emergency resources, communication systems, administration of the plan, emergency response procedures, communication of the procedures, and debriefing and post-traumatic stress procedure. The plan should be used to set emergency procedures, implement and communicate the procedures, and ensure any required training has been completed. The plan should also be evaluated regularly to guarantee that it conforms to current operations and conditions on the site. In any emergency response procedures, The following steps are basic and essential. Stay calm. Assess the situation. Take command. Provide protection. Aid and manage. Maintain contacts, and guide emergency services. In summary, the following items were covered in this safety presentation. Introduction to OSHA, OSHA's most cited violations, serious and willful violations, creating a construction safety program, and emergency management. We hope this presentation has given you some new ideas to assist you in improving safety on your job sites. And thank you from Tech Training LLC.